He belongs to us now. You need to step aside. Those words still echo in my ears. The coldness of that tone, the cruelty disguised as truth. It was my daughter-in-law, Christine, on the other end of the line, speaking about my only son as if he were newly acquired property, as if 42 years of maternal love could simply be erased with one sentence. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 68 years old, and I never imagined I would live to see the day when my own son would get married without inviting me, without telling me, without even giving me the chance to be there for one of the most important moments of his life. It all began with an innocent question. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I had prepared breakfast for Michael as I always did whenever he came to visit. Blueberry pancakes, his favorite since childhood. Christine was sitting at the table, scrolling through her phone, barely touching the food I had prepared with such care. So, dears, have you decided on a wedding date yet? I need to start looking for an appropriate mother of the groom dress, I asked, smiling, while pouring more coffee. The silence that followed should have warned me. Michael suddenly became very interested in his plate, avoiding my gaze. It was Christine who answered, looking up from her phone for the first time that morning. You missed it. We got married yesterday. For words. Simple, direct, cutting. I felt as if someone had thrown ice water in my face. The coffee pot trembled in my hand, spilling a few drops on the tablecloth my mother had given me, one of the few items I still have from her. Yesterday, I managed to stammer, searching Michael's face. You got married yesterday? My son still couldn't look me in the eyes. It was something small, Mom. At the courthouse. No ceremony, no reception. Just the two of us and the witnesses. The witnesses, I repeated, trying to process what I was hearing. Who were they? Christine's parents, he answered quietly. Her parents were there. And I, the woman who had spent 30 hours in labor to bring him into this world, who had held his hand on every first day of school, who had stayed up countless nights when he had a fever. I didn't even deserve a phone call. I felt tears forming, but I refused to cry in front of them, especially in front of Christine, whose eyes now displayed something dangerously close to satisfaction. I see, was all I could say, as I put the coffee pot back on the table with trembling hands. Congratulations, then. The rest of breakfast passed in uncomfortable silence. Michael looked like a guilty little boy, eating hurriedly as if wanting to escape as quickly as possible. Christine, on the other hand, seemed perfectly at ease, as if she hadn't just delivered a devastating blow. When they finished, Michael gave me a hasty hug and an awkward kiss on the cheek. We'll talk later, Mom, he mumbled, already halfway to the door. Christine didn't even bother with a proper goodbye, just a casual wave, as if I were a distant acquaintance barely deserving consideration. After they left, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the remains of a breakfast I had prepared with so much love, and allowed the tears to finally fall. It wasn't just about missing my son's wedding, though that was painful enough. It was about what it signified. It was about being deliberately excluded, erased, as if 42 years of motherhood could simply be discarded. But that breakfast was just the beginning. What I didn't know was that this exclusion was only the first of many to come. That Christine was just beginning her systematic campaign to remove me from Michael's life, and that things would get much, much worse before they got better. That night, alone in my quiet house, I looked at the photographs decorating my walls. Michael learning to walk. Michael at his high school graduation. Michael receiving his university diploma, with a smile so wide it looked like his face might split. In all these photos, I was beside him, equally proud, equally radiant. Where had that connection gone? At what point had my sweet boy transformed into a stranger who allowed me to be treated like an inconvenience? The weeks that followed were an exercise in self-discipline. I did what any mother would do. I waited. I waited for Michael to call. I waited for an apology, or at least an explanation. I waited for some sign that he missed me as much as I missed him. Days turned into weeks. I called a few times, only to hear Christine's cold, controlled voice informing me that Michael is busy right now. I sent messages that received short replies, clearly written in haste, without emotion or connection. Then, almost a month after the wedding I never saw, came that call. It was Christine again, her voice deliberately calm, almost rehearsed. "Evelyn," she said, never Mom or even Mrs. Carter, always just Evelyn, as if determined to deny any family connection between us. "We need to establish some boundaries." "Boundaries?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "Yes. Michael and I are a family now. He belongs to us, to our new family. You need to understand this and step aside." Step aside, as if I were an obstacle, not the woman who had dedicated her life to raising that man. As if my love were something inconvenient, a barrier to be removed. "Christine," I began, struggling to keep my voice steady. "A son is not a possession, and love is not a limited resource. Michael can love us both, in different ways." She laughed then, a brief, hard sound. "I don't think you're understanding. I'm telling you to back off. Stop calling. Stop sending messages. Stop trying to intrude in our lives." The pain of those words was almost physical. I had to sit down, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "May I speak to Michael, please?" I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. "He's at work," she replied quickly. Too late I realized it was a lie. I heard his voice in the background, asking who was on the phone. "No one important," Christine answered, not bothering to cover the receiver. "Just a telemarketer, no one important." Telemarketer, his mother reduced to an inconvenience, a nuisance to be dismissed. I hung up the phone and for the first time in a long time, felt something beyond the pain. I felt anger, not explosive, destructive anger, but something deeper, colder, a determination. Because at that moment, I understood that I wasn't just fighting for my relationship with my son. I was fighting for my own dignity. What Christine didn't know, what she couldn't understand, is that mothers like me, women who survived the Great Depression as children, who worked in factories during wars, who marched for civil rights, don't give up easily. We don't bend. We don't break. And I didn't yet know how, but somehow I would get my son back. Not to take him away from Christine. I never wanted that, but to remind him of who he was. To remind him that the human heart is capable of loving many people in many different ways. To remind him that the bonds of blood, nurture, and shared history cannot simply be undone by cruel words or calculated manipulations. What I never imagined was the price I would pay for that determination, or how deep the valley of loneliness I would have to cross before seeing the light again. If you're enjoying my story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happened next would change not only my relationship with Michael, but my entire understanding of love, forgiveness, and the true meaning of family. The isolation that followed was gradual, like the tide rising so slowly that you barely notice you're being surrounded by water until you can no longer touch the bottom. In the 3 months after that call with Christine, I saw my son only twice, both at public occasions where social pressure made it impossible to completely ignore me. The first was at Clara's 70th birthday, my best friend. Michael and Christine arrived when the party was already halfway through. He gave me a quick hug, his eyes constantly shifting to Christine, as if seeking approval. "I miss you, son," I said, holding his hands. "Why don't you come visit?" "We've been busy," he answered easily. "Work. The new house." "The new house?" I asked, feeling a pang in my chest. "You moved." Guilt briefly flickered in his eyes. "I thought I told you. We bought a house on the other side of town, further away from me," was what he didn't say. The apartment where Michael used to live was only 20 minutes from my house. Now it was almost 2 hours away. Christine soon appeared at his side, sliding an arm possessively around his waist. "Michael, your colleagues just arrived. Come greet them." She smiled at me, a smile that never reached her eyes. "Excuse us, Evelyn. The second time we saw each other was at the funeral of George Peterson, our former neighbor. Christine orchestrated Michael's every move. They sat on the opposite side of the chapel, even though there were empty seats next to me. When I finally managed a few moments alone with him, Michael seemed nervous, almost frightened. "Is everything all right, son?" I asked. "You seem different." "I'm fine, Mom," he answered automatically, but there was something in his eyes that alarmed me, an absence where light had once been. Between these rare encounters, I tried to stay in touch, thinking of you cards that never received a response, messages answered with monosyllables or simply ignored, calls that went to voicemail or were answered by Christine, who always had an excuse about why Michael couldn't talk. It was by chance that I discovered how far Christine had gone to isolate me. I met Sarah, Michael's former secretary, at the supermarket. After greetings, she looked at me curiously. "How are you feeling now, Evelyn?" "Michael was so worried when he told us about your condition." I froze. "My condition?" Sarah looked embarrassed. "Oh, maybe I shouldn't have mentioned it. Michael told us you were having memory problems. Early-stage dementia, he said. That's why he asked to redirect your calls to Christine, so she could filter the stress. The world seemed to spin." "Dementia?" "He had told people I had dementia." "Sarah, I don't have any memory problems. My last checkup was 3 months ago, and the doctor said I have the health of someone 10 years younger." That night, lying in bed, I took inventory of everything. The secret wedding, the move, the isolation, and now, the defamation of my mental health to justify that isolation. For the first time, I allowed myself to see Christine for what she truly was, not just a difficult daughter-in-law, but someone deliberately cruel, manipulating my son and destroying our relationship. What disturbed me most was Michael's complete surrender. Where was the strong, independent young man I had raised? How could he allow such lies to be spread about me, his own mother? I began to notice disturbing patterns in his behavior. How he always checked his phone, immediately responding to Christine's messages as if fearing the consequences of delay. How he had abandoned old friends and hobbies. How his opinions now seemed echoes of her thoughts. Martha, my friend and retired marriage counselor, confirmed my suspicions during our weekly tea. "What you're describing, Evelyn, is intentional isolation," she explained. "It's a common tactic used by manipulators. They isolate the person from their support systems, family, friends, anyone who might offer perspective. It's like removing all the emergency exits from a building." "But Michael is a grown man," I argued. "He's intelligent, successful." Martha shook her head. "Emotional abuse doesn't discriminate, Evelyn. It starts subtly and increases so gradually that the victim barely notices." Her words awakened painful memories of my own mother, staying with my father, despite his violent temper, of how she became increasingly smaller, quieter, until almost nothing remained of the vibrant woman she had once been. Could history be repeating itself with my son? The next day, I made a decision. If Christine was creating barriers, I would find ways around them. If she was spreading lies, I would respond with truth consistently and persistently. I sent a handwritten letter to his office, marked personal and confidential. I wrote about memories, values, and my unconditional love. I didn't mention Christine or accuse anyone. Just love, memories, and an outstretched hand. A week later, Michael appeared alone at my door, looking nervous and exhausted. "I got your letter," he said simply. "Would you like to come in?" "I just made lemonade." He hesitated, looking at his watch. "I can't stay long. Christine thinks I'm in a meeting." The fact that he had to lie to visit his mother broke my heart, but I kept my expression neutral. Sitting on the porch, he finally looked directly at me. "I'm sorry about the wedding, Mom. It wasn't my idea not to invite you. Christine thought it would be better that way. Just something small. I should have insisted." "Michael, you seem unhappy. Am I wrong?" He looked away. "Things are complicated. Christine has specific expectations about our life, about who we should socialize with, about you. What kind of expectations? She thinks you're intrusive, that you try to control me through guilt, that our relationship is unhealthy. Each word was like a small knife, but I maintained my composure. And you, Michael? What do you think? He looked like a lost boy. I don't know anymore, Mom. Sometimes I feel like I can't distinguish my own thoughts from hers. It's like I'm disappearing. I gently placed my hand over his. Michael, do you remember what your father always said? Truth is not in a hurry, but it always arrives in the end. A ghost of a smile passed over his lips. Yes, the truth about who we are, about our love, that truth hasn't changed. No matter how many distortions or lies are told, it remains. I'm here, Michael. I've always been. I'll always be. When he stood to leave, something fell from his pocket, the diary James had given him on his 15th birthday. Your diary, I said, returning it to him. Do you still write in it? Michael ran his fingers over the worn cover. I started again recently. It helps clear my mind. That brief visit had given me something. I had begun to lose hope. My son was still there, somewhere behind the walls Christine had built around him. And that diary, a symbol of the honesty James always valued, might be the key to helping him find his way back. What I didn't know was that my hope would soon be tested in ways I could never have imagined, and that the battle for my son's heart and mind was about to become much more dangerous. The second time we saw each other was at the funeral of George Peterson, our former neighbor. Christine orchestrated Michael's every move. They sat on the opposite side of the chapel, even though there were empty seats next to me. When I finally managed a few moments alone with him, Michael seemed nervous, almost frightened. Is everything all right, son? I asked. You seem different. I'm fine, Mom, he answered automatically, but there was something in his eyes that alarmed me. An absence where light had once been. Between these rare encounters, I tried to stay in touch, thinking of you, cards that never received a response, messages answered with monosyllables or simply ignored, calls that went to voicemail or were answered by Christine, who always had an excuse about why Michael couldn't talk. It was by chance that I discovered how far Christine had gone to isolate me. I met Sarah, Michael's former secretary, at the supermarket. After greetings, she looked at me curiously. How are you feeling now, Evelyn? Michael was so worried when he told us about your condition. I froze. My condition? Sarah looked embarrassed. Oh, maybe I shouldn't have mentioned it. Michael told us you were having memory problems. Early stage dementia, he said. That's why he asked to redirect your calls to Christine, so she could filter the stress. The world seemed to spin. Dementia? He had told people I had dementia. Sarah, I don't have any memory problems. My last checkup was 3 months ago, and the doctor said I have the health of someone 10 years younger. That night, lying in bed, I took inventory of everything. The secret wedding, the move, the isolation, and now, the defamation of my mental health to justify that isolation. For the first time, I allowed myself to see Christine for what she truly was, not just a difficult daughter-in-law, but someone deliberately cruel, manipulating my son and destroying our relationship. What disturbed me most was Michael's complete surrender. Where was the strong, independent young man I had raised? How could he allow such lies to be spread about me, his own mother? I began to notice disturbing patterns in his behavior. How he always checked his phone, immediately responding to Christine's messages as if fearing the consequences of delay. How he had abandoned old friends and hobbies. How his opinions now seemed echoes of her thoughts. Martha, my friend and retired marriage counselor, confirmed my suspicions during our weekly tea. What you're describing, Evelyn, is intentional isolation, she explained. It's a common tactic used by manipulators. They isolate the person from their support systems, family, friends, anyone who might offer perspective. It's like removing all the emergency exits from a building. But Michael is a grown man, I argued. He's intelligent, successful, Martha shook her head. Emotional abuse doesn't discriminate, Evelyn. It starts subtly and increases so gradually that the victim barely notices. Her words awakened painful memories of my own mother, staying with my father despite his violent temper, of how she became increasingly smaller, quieter, until almost nothing remained of the vibrant woman she had once been. Could history be repeating itself with my son? The next day, I made a decision. If Christine was creating barriers, I would find ways around them. If she was spreading lies, I would respond with truth consistently and persistently. I sent a handwritten letter to his office, marked personal and confidential. I wrote about memories, values, and my unconditional love. I didn't mention Christine or accuse anyone. Just love, memories, and an outstretched hand. A week later, Michael appeared alone at my door, looking nervous and exhausted. "I got your letter," he said simply. "Would you like to come in?" I just made lemonade. He hesitated, looking at his watch. "I can't stay long. Christine thinks I'm in a meeting." The fact that he had to lie to visit his mother broke my heart, but I kept my expression neutral. Sitting on the porch, he finally looked directly at me. "I'm sorry about the wedding, Mom. It wasn't my idea not to invite you. Christine thought it would be better that way. Just something small. I should have insisted." "Michael, you seem unhappy. Am I wrong?" He looked away. "Things are complicated. Christine has specific expectations about our life, about who we should socialize with, about you." "What kind of expectations?" "She thinks you're intrusive, that you try to control me through guilt, that our relationship is unhealthy." Each word was like a small knife, but I maintained my composure. "And you, Michael? What do you think?" He looked like a lost boy. "I don't know anymore, Mom. Sometimes I feel like I can't distinguish my own thoughts from hers. It's like I'm disappearing." I gently placed my hand over his. "Michael, do you remember what your father always said? Truth is not in a hurry, but it always arrives in the end." A ghost of a smile passed over his lips. "Yes, the truth about who we are, about our love. That truth hasn't changed. No matter how many distortions or lies are told, it remains. I'm here, Michael. I've always been. I'll always be." When he stood to leave, something fell from his pocket, the diary James had given him on his 15th birthday. "Your diary," I said, returning it to him. "Do you still write in it?" Michael ran his fingers over the worn cover. "I started again recently. It helps clear my mind. That brief visit had given me something. I had begun to lose hope. My son was still there, somewhere behind the walls Christine had built around him. And that diary, a symbol of the honesty James always valued, might be the key to helping him find his way back. What I didn't know was that my hope would soon be tested in ways I could never have imagined, and that the battle for my son's heart and mind was about to become much more dangerous. Block 3. Rising action plus problem intensification plus decision. Michael's visit, though brief, had kindled a small flame of hope in my heart. But Christine, as I discovered a week later, realized something had changed, and her reaction was swift and devastating. It was a Wednesday when I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "Mrs. Carter, this is Dr. Bennett from Memorial Hospital. Your son, Michael, has been in an accident. Nothing serious, but he's here in the emergency room." My heart raced. I grabbed my purse and keys before even hanging up the phone, already heading to the car. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Actually," the doctor continued, "he specifically asked that you not come. He said his wife is already on her way, and he'd prefer you stay home to avoid causing additional stress." I stopped mid-motion, confused. "Additional stress? He's my son." "I understand, ma'am. I'm just relaying the message." Something about that call felt wrong. It wasn't just Michael's request, it was something in the voice, in the way the words were chosen. I thanked him and hung up, but instead of putting the phone aside, I immediately called Memorial Hospital. "Emergency department. How may I help you?" A female voice answered. Good afternoon. I received a call informing me that my son, Michael Carter, is admitted there. I'd like to confirm if he's all right. A brief pause, the sound of keys being typed. We don't have any patient by that name registered today, ma'am. Are you sure it was this hospital? The initial relief Michael wasn't hurt was quickly replaced by alarm. Someone had deliberately lied to keep me away from my son, and I had a strong suspicion who. That same afternoon, I tried calling Michael. As expected, it went to voicemail. I sent a casual message, thinking of you today, son. Hope you're well, without mentioning the false hospital call. The response came hours later, clearly not written by Michael. Please stop trying to contact me. I need space. Respect my boundaries. It was Christine's vocabulary, not his. My next call was to Martha. Things are getting worse, I explained, reporting the incident. She's actively preventing me from seeing or speaking to my son, using increasingly extreme tactics. Martha sighed heavily. Evelyn, this is no longer just a case of a controlling daughter-in-law. This is abusive isolation and potentially fraud. If someone impersonated a doctor, she paused, carefully choosing her next words. Have you considered seeking legal help? Maybe a restraining order against Christine? A restraining order? I repeated, shocked. Martha, she's my son's wife. How can I do that? I'm more concerned about what she might try to do to you, Martha responded grimly. If she's willing to go this far to keep you away, what will her next steps be? The question hung between us, disturbing in its implications. In the days that followed, I began to notice strange things. An unfamiliar car parked in front of my house. For hours, calls that hung up when I answered. The constant feeling of being watched. Then, on a Saturday morning, I found my mailbox broken into, letters scattered on the ground, some torn to pieces. One of them, I realized with horror, was the most recent letter I had written to Michael, which had never been sent, was still inside the house on the kitchen table. Someone had been inside my home. I called the police immediately. The young officer who responded to the call was polite but clearly skeptical. Ladies your age often forget where they put things, he suggested gently. Are you sure you didn't store the letter somewhere else and forgot? Officer Johnson, I replied firmly. I spent 42 years as a librarian. I organized and cataloged more than 50,000 books in my career. I don't forget where I put things. Someone entered my home without permission. He reluctantly noted the incident, but I knew nothing would be done. No visible signs of forced entry. No witnesses. No evidence beyond my word, the word of an elderly woman who, in his eyes, was probably confused. That night, for the first time since James died, I felt afraid to be alone in my own home. I locked all doors and windows, dragged a chair to block my bedroom door, and slept with the phone beside my pillow, or at least tried to sleep. The next morning, I made two important decisions. First, I installed security cameras at the front door, in the back, on the sides of the house. If someone tried to enter again, I would have concrete evidence. Second, I scheduled an appointment with Gregory Simmons, the lawyer who had helped me with James's will. Greg listened patiently as I related everything: the secret wedding, the progressive isolation, the lies about my mental health, the false hospital call, and now, the invasion of my home. When I finished, he folded his hands on the table, his face serious. Evelyn, what you're describing goes beyond a simple family conflict. There are potential elements of harassment, defamation, and possibly even proxy abuse. Proxy abuse, I repeated, confused. It's when someone isolates and abuses another person by controlling their access to the outside world, including family members. We typically see this in cases involving vulnerable elderly or disabled individuals, but it can happen in any relationship where there's a power imbalance. Greg opened a folder and removed some documents. I have some suggestions on how to proceed. I left his office 2 hours later with a concrete plan. I wouldn't seek a restraining order, not yet, but I would start methodically documenting every incident. Greg also recommended that I consult a therapist specialized in abusive family relationships, not just for my own emotional well-being, but to have a professional who could eventually testify about my mental health, if necessary. "And what about Michael?" I asked before leaving. "How can I help him if I can't even talk to him?" Greg thought for a moment. "Keep trying, but carefully. Don't force contact in ways Christine could use against you. And remember, ultimately, Michael is an adult. He needs to recognize what's happening and decide for himself to leave this situation." That phrase accompanied me on the way home. Michael needed to decide for himself. But how could he do that if he was so deeply manipulated that he couldn't even distinguish his own thoughts? How could he escape from a prison he couldn't even see? The answer came unexpectedly a week later, in the form of a familiar figure standing on my porch. At dusk, Lisa, Michael's childhood best friend, now a nurse at the city hospital. "Mrs. Carter," she said, her face tense with concern. "We need to talk about Michael." Sitting in my kitchen, Lisa told me how she had bumped into Michael by chance at the hospital where she worked, and he had gone for a routine examination. "He was different, Mrs. Carter. He barely spoke to me, kept looking constantly over his shoulder as if afraid of being seen talking." "Was Christine with him?" I asked. "Not at the moment I found him, but apparently she was somewhere in the hospital. Because when she appeared..." Lisa shook her head, remembering. It was like a switch had been turned off. Michael practically stopped talking, except to agree with everything she said. "Did you speak with him after that?" "I tried calling, but the number I have doesn't work anymore." "And then something strange happened." Lisa leaned forward. "I received an email from Michael's old work address, asking me to meet him at a cafe far from the city. The email specifically said not to reply, not to tell anyone, and to delete the message after reading." My heart raced. "Did you go?" "I did, and he showed up. Alone." Lisa took a deep breath. "Mrs. Carter, Michael is frightened. He told me that Christine monitors all his communications, email, phone, even his location through his cell phone. That she checked his bank accounts, changed his passwords, and gradually took control of all his finances." "My God," I whispered. "There's more," Lisa continued. "He's been trying to gather the courage to leave, but he's afraid, not just of Christine, but of how people would react. A grown man, successful, admitting he's being, well, abused by his wife. He fears ridicule, judgment." She looked me in the eyes. "And mostly, he's ashamed to face you after everything." "I would never judge him," I protested. "He's my son. He knows that, deep down." "But shame is a powerful emotion." Lisa placed something on the table, a flash drive. "Michael asked me to give this to you. It's his diary digitized. He's been writing everything, every incident, every manipulation, every moment Christine isolated or controlled him. He said that if something happens to him, you need to have this." I looked at the small object with a mixture of hope and fear. If something happens to him? What did he mean by that? Lisa hesitated. "I'm not sure, but he seemed genuinely frightened, as if he feared for his own safety." That night, after Lisa left, I connected the flash drive to my computer with trembling hands. What I found confirmed my worst fears, page after page documenting a relationship that had transformed from controlling to emotionally abusive, and increasingly to potentially dangerous. Michael described how Christine had gradually taken control of every aspect of his life, how she had convinced him his memory wasn't reliable, frequently insisting he had said or done things he didn't remember, how she isolated him from friends, family, and eventually even from co-workers, claiming everyone had hidden intentions or spoke badly of him behind his back, how she obsessively monitored his location, demanding he video call to prove where he was, how she exploded in fits of rage when he disobeyed, followed by periods of excessive affection when he submitted. The last entry, dated just 2 days before, sent a chill down my spine. I found the pills again today, hidden in my breakfast, small and white, dissolving at the bottom of the cup. It's the third time this month. The days I take them are always the same. I feel dizzy, confused, have difficulty concentrating. She says it's just stress, exhaustion. But I know what I saw. I'm keeping one of them, hidden in the lining of my old watch. I need to find out what it is. I need to get out of here while I can still think for myself. I left the computer, my hands shaking. This was no longer just a matter of emotional control or isolation. If Michael was right, Christine was administering medication without his consent, potentially putting his physical health in danger. I picked up the phone to call Greg, the lawyer, but stopped before dialing. It was almost 11 at night. What would I say? That I suspected my daughter-in-law was drugging my son. Without concrete proof, without Michael himself to confirm, how would this sound? I put the phone back on the table and took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. This situation had escalated beyond unanswered letters and calls, beyond hurt feelings and exclusions. Michael was potentially in real danger. At that moment, I made my decision. I wouldn't wait any longer, wouldn't rely just on secret emails or clandestine visits. It was time for direct action. Tomorrow, with or without an invitation, I would go to their house. I would confront Christine if necessary. I would see my son face to face on his territory. I would offer him a concrete way out, a safe place to stay, support for whatever he needed to do next. As I prepared for bed, a storm began to form outside, distant thunder announcing its approach. It seemed appropriate, nature reflecting the storm I knew would come when I finally confronted Christine. I knelt beside the bed, as I had done so many nights since this ordeal began. Lord, I prayed quietly, give me strength for what I need to do, courage to face whatever comes, and wisdom to help my son find his way back to the light. I stood up, a calm resolution filling me. Tomorrow would be the day. Tomorrow, finally, I would openly fight for my son's soul and well-being, not as an intrusive or controlling mother, but as a woman who refused to stand by while someone she loved was in danger. The storm was approaching, and this time, I would be ready. I woke before dawn, with a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The previous night's storm had passed, leaving the air fresh and clean, a new beginning. While preparing my coffee, I mentally organized my plan. Directly confronting Christine could be dangerous, not just for me, but especially for Michael. If she was really medicating him without his knowledge, a confrontation might lead her to even more extreme actions. I needed to be careful, strategic. My first call was to Greg, the lawyer, as soon as the clock struck a.m. We need to act now, I explained, reporting what I had discovered in Michael's diary. If he's being drugged, this goes beyond emotional manipulation. It's physical assault, Evelyn. Greg responded cautiously. I understand your concern, but we need concrete evidence before making any accusation of this kind. A diary by itself isn't sufficient proof that she's administering medication without consent. And what do you suggest I do? Wait until something irreversible happens? There was a pause. No, but we need to be strategic. First, we need to ensure Michael has a safe exit when he's ready. Second, we need to document any possible evidence of abuse. And third, we need to do this in a way that doesn't put you at legal risk. We agreed on a plan. Greg would contact a private investigator to discreetly observe the house and document comings and goings. He would also contact a forensic psychiatrist who could evaluate Michael's diary and potentially testify about abuse patterns. Meanwhile, I would prepare my house as a safe haven for when Michael decided to leave. My next call was to Lisa. Can you contact Michael again? I asked, safely, without Christine knowing. I can try, she replied. He mentioned that sometimes he can use a library computer during lunch hour. Christine doesn't monitor his location as closely during work hours. Perfect. Tell him I'm ready to help when he decides to leave. That I have a locker. That I'm preparing a room for him here. That I have the diary and understand the gravity of the situation. I paused. And Lisa, tell him I'm not angry. That I don't judge him. That I love him and just want him to be safe. After hanging up, I began preparing the house. I tidied Michael's old room, washing and ironing fresh sheets, opening windows to let in the fresh morning air. I placed an old photograph on the bedside table. Michael at 12, smiling proudly beside the wooden fort he and James had built together in the backyard. As I worked, my mind kept returning to the diary. Something about the pills Christine was supposedly administering to Michael bothered me. Small and white, causing dizziness and confusion. Why did that sound familiar? It was while folding a towel that memory struck me. James, in the final months of his illness, taking anxiety medication that caused similar side effects. I ran to my room and retrieved an old medicine box I had kept. There were small white pills, lorazepam, a benzodiazepine prescribed to James to help with anxiety during chemotherapy. Some pills were missing. A sense of horror washed over me. Christine had been in my house several times before the wedding. Could she have found and taken these pills? Was she really drugging Michael with medication prescribed to someone else years ago? I called Greg again, reporting my discovery. This is extremely serious, he said, his voice grave. If she's administering benzodiazepines without prescription or consent, we're talking about multiple crimes. We need to inform Dr. Werner, the forensic psychiatrist, and perhaps even the police. Not yet, I argued. Not until we have Michael safe. If she discovers we're involving authorities, who knows what she might do? While finishing preparing the house, another memory surfaced, something Michael had written in his diary about hiding one of the pills in the lining of his old watch. The pocket watch James had given him on his 21st birthday. If we could recover that pill, we would have physical evidence. That afternoon, I received a message from Lisa. Mission accomplished. Eagle aware. Return expected Friday. Friday. 2 days from now. Michael knew about our plans and was preparing to leave. I spent the next 2 days in a state of constant vigilance, checking and reconfirming every detail of the plan. The room was ready. Greg had all the necessary legal documentation for potential protection orders. The private investigator had established a routine of discreetly observing the house. Dr. Werner had reviewed the digitized diary and prepared a preliminary assessment. On Thursday night, I received another message from Lisa. Change of plans. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Your location. Prepare for possible storm. Michael was coming earlier than planned, and the mention of a storm suggested he feared Christine might discover and follow him. I immediately called Greg to update our plans. On Friday, I woke at dawn and made one final check of everything. The room was perfect, with clean towels, new clothes I had bought for Michael, and even his favorite cereal in the pantry. I put fresh water in the flowers on the dining table and lit a candle with the apple and cinnamon scent he always liked. As a precaution, I asked Martha to come keep me company. Having a witness at home could be useful if Christine appeared and tried to cause problems. Martha arrived at a.m., bringing her famous coffee cake and a serene determination I've always admired in her. Are you nervous? She asked as we set the table for lunch. Curiously, no, I replied. I just want him to arrive here safely. At 1:30 p.m., I heard a car in the driveway. My heart raced. It was too early. Michael wasn't supposed to arrive until p.m. I looked through the front window and saw an unfamiliar car parking, not Michael's, but a silver sedan I'd never seen before. Martha joined me at the window. Is it him? No, I answered, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I don't recognize the car. The driver's door opened, and Christine stepped out. Alone. Oh dear, Martha murmured. How did she find out? There was no time for speculation. Christine was walking determinedly toward my door, her face a mask of cold determination. I took a deep breath and straightened my shoulders. "Martha, record this on your phone," I instructed calmly. "Discreetly, but make sure to capture everything." That said, when I opened the door, Christine was already on the porch, her finger hovering over the doorbell. For a moment, she seemed surprised to see me there, as if she hadn't expected me to answer so quickly. "Christine," I greeted with a calm I didn't feel. "What a surprise. Is Michael with you?" Her eyes narrowed. "You know very well he's not, Evelyn. Actually, that's why I'm here, to warn you to stay away from my husband." I kept my expression neutral. "Why don't you come in? We can talk like adults." She hesitated, clearly not having expected an invitation. After a moment's consideration, she entered, her eyes quickly scanning the living room, observing every detail: the family photos, the fresh flowers, the table set for 3 people. "Expecting visitors?" she asked, a cold smile forming. "Always good to be prepared," I replied simply. "Would you like some coffee?" "I'm not here to socialize, Evelyn." She crossed her arms. "I'm here to make a few things clear. I know what you're doing. I know about the secret messages, the clandestine meetings with Lisa. The plan." "I'm not here to socialize, Evelyn." She crossed her arms. "I'm here to make a few things clear. I know what you're doing. I know about the secret messages, the clandestine meetings with Lisa, the plan to rescue Michael." I kept my voice firm. "Christine, if Michael wants to leave your house, that's his choice as an adult. This isn't about rescue." "His choice?" She laughed, a humorless sound. "Michael can barely choose what clothes to wear in the morning without my help." "Do you really think he's making this decision on his own?" "Why would he not?" I asked calmly. "He's a grown man, intelligent and capable." Something dark and dangerous passed over Christine's face. "You have no idea, do you, how fragile he really is? How much he needs constant supervision, or control?" She took a step toward me, her voice lowering to an almost threatening tone. "Call it what you want, but he belongs to me now. I know him better than you ever will. I know what he needs, what's best for him." "Like medicating him without his knowledge?" I asked directly, carefully observing her reaction. Christine froze for a moment so brief I almost didn't notice. Then her face transformed into a mask of indignation. "What are you talking about?" "The pills, Christine. The small white pills you put in his coffee. That make him confused, disoriented. That make him more manageable." "That's absurd," she replied, but there was an almost imperceptible tremor in her voice. "Michael has anxiety issues. He takes prescribed medication." "With full knowledge, prescribed by whom?" I asked, because curiously, some lorazepam pills disappeared from James's prescription. "The same ones you're giving to Michael, aren't they?" Christine's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly. "You're senile, confused, creating conspiracies where none exist. This is exactly why Michael needs to stay away from you. Your constant drama, your accusations, your need to be the center of his life." Martha chose that moment to speak, emerging from the kitchen where she'd been discreetly recording. "She's not alone in these observations, Christine, and she's certainly not confused." Christine spun around, surprised by the presence of another person. "And who are you?" "Martha Reynolds, retired marriage counselor and witness to what's happening here today." Martha smiled politely, but her eyes remained firm. "Including what you just said about Michael belonging to you and needing constant supervision." Christine's phone rang, interrupting the confrontation. She looked at the screen, an expression of alarm crossing her face. "I have to go," she said abruptly. "Christine," I called when she was already at the door. "One last thing. The watch. Michael's old pocket watch. The one James gave him. Where is it?" She stopped, her hand on the doorknob. "Why, just curiosity," I replied casually. "It's a family heirloom. I hoped he still had it." Something in my tone must have aroused her suspicion, because her eyes narrowed. "It's safe. At home, where Michael will be very soon." After she left, Martha and I exchanged worried looks. "She knows," said Martha, "about Michael's plans to leave." "Yes," I agreed, a new fear growing inside me. "And that phone call." She seemed alarmed, as if answering our concern. My own phone rang. It was Lisa, her voice agitated. "Mrs. Carter, it's Michael. He didn't show up for lunch as we planned. He's not answering his phone. I'm worried." A chill ran down my spine. "Christine just left here. She knows Lisa. Somehow she discovered the plan." There was a moment of horrified silence. Oh my God, what if she did something to him? The possibility we both feared, but hadn't dared verbalize, hung between us. If Christine was really medicating Michael against his will, what else might she be capable of when cornered? "I'm going to their house," I decided immediately. "Now." "Not alone," Lisa protested. "Wait. I'll meet you there. And we should call the police." "No police. Not yet. It could make the situation worse." I looked at Martha, who nodded in understanding. "But I won't go alone." As we grabbed our purses and keys, the phone rang again. An unknown number. I answered with racing heart. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was weak, but unmistakable. "Mom? It's Michael. I need your help." My heart nearly stopped. "Michael, where are you? Are you all right?" "I'm at the Shell gas station on Highway 16. I managed to get out while she was visiting you." His voice sounded slurred, confused. "She put something in my drink this morning, more than usual. I'm dizzy. Can't drive anymore." "Stay exactly where you are," I instructed, signaling for Martha to get the car keys. "We're coming to get you. Don't move." "And Michael?" "Yes?" "Do you have the watch with you?" "Dad's pocket watch." There was a pause, followed by a whisper of understanding. "Yes, and what's hidden inside it too." That confirmation gave me a wave of relief and renewed determination. "Good. Keep it safe. We'll be there in 20 minutes." As Martha drove quickly toward the gas station, I called Greg, updating him on the situation. "We're going to pick up Michael now. He has physical evidence the pill he hid. When we're all safe, we'll need to act quickly." "Understood," Greg responded. "I have the protection order papers ready." "And Evelyn? Be careful. If she really is medicating him without consent, we're dealing with someone potentially dangerous and unpredictable." Those words echoed in my mind as we approached the gas station. The battle that had begun with a secret wedding and painful exclusion had transformed into something much more sinister. But for the first time in months, I felt real hope. Michael had taken the first step to leave. He had found the courage to ask for help, and I would be there for him, as I always had been. Not to control him or keep him dependent, as Christine had done, but to support him as he rebuilt his strength, his independence, and his life. The gas station appeared in the distance, and my heart accelerated. In a few minutes, I would have my son back. The road ahead would be difficult: emotional recovery, possible legal battles, the painful process of untangling from an abusive relationship. But we would take each step together, one day at a time. The truth, as James always said, is not in a hurry, but it always arrives in the end. The gas station was quiet that Friday afternoon. I spotted Michael immediately, sitting on a bench outside the convenience store, hunched over as if trying to occupy the smallest space possible. My heart ached seeing my son, always so tall and proud, looking so diminished. "There he is," I pointed, and Martha had barely stopped the car when I was already opening the door. "Michael." He raised his head slowly, his eyes taking time to focus. When he recognized me, something in his face transformed, a mixture of relief and shame that almost made me cry. "Mom," he murmured as I approached. "You really came?" "Of course I came," I answered, carefully embracing him. He was thinner than I remembered, and there was a tremor in his body that wasn't natural. "Let's go home." In the car, Michael sat in the back seat, occasionally leaning forward as if fighting waves of dizziness. "I'm sorry," he repeated, "for everything, for the wedding, for believing her lies about you, for letting this go so far. Not now, I said gently, turning from the front seat to hold his hand. We'll have plenty of time to talk when you're feeling better. Now, the most important thing is keeping you safe. She'll look for me, he said, a flash of fear crossing his face. When she realizes I've disappeared, she'll know exactly where to find me. And we'll be prepared, Martha assured him, her eyes meeting his in the rearview mirror. You're not alone in this, Michael. During the drive, I called Greg and Lisa, informing them that we had found Michael and were heading home. Greg promised to come by later with the necessary documents to start the legal process. Lisa, who was also a nurse, said she would come to assess Michael's condition. Do you still have the pill? I asked Michael when we were almost home. He nodded, taking the pocket watch from his coat with trembling hands. Carefully, he opened the mechanism and removed a small improvised compartment. There it was, a small white pill intact. I kept it exactly as I found it in my cup, he explained. She doesn't know I discovered it. I thought no one would believe me without proof. Well, now we have proof, Martha said firmly, and very soon she'll have to answer for her actions. When we arrived at my house, we helped Michael inside and settled him on the sofa. He looked around as if rediscovering a long-forgotten place, his eyes resting on the family photographs, the books on the shelves, the small details that made up the home where he had grown up. I had almost forgotten what it was like here, he murmured. She didn't like me talking about my childhood, about your dad. Said I was stuck in the past, that I needed to focus on our life. Lisa arrived 20 minutes later, her professional efficiency immediately taking over. She checked Michael's vital signs, asked some basic questions, and examined the pill. Looks like a benzodiazepine, she confirmed. Possibly lorazepam or something similar. Without lab analysis, it's hard to be sure, but the symptoms match sedation, confusion, impaired coordination. How long has this been happening, Michael? He frowned, concentrating. I started noticing about 6 months ago. At first it was occasional days when I felt strangely tired or confused. But in the last few weeks, almost daily. Always after the breakfast she prepared. And today? I asked. Today was different, he answered, his voice lowering. The dose seemed larger. I think she suspected I was planning to leave. I passed out after breakfast and woke up confused, but I managed to get out while she was visiting you. He hesitated. What did she want anyway? To warn me to stay away from you, I answered honestly. She knows, Michael. Somehow, she discovered our plans. As if summoned by our words, we heard the sound of tires screeching in the driveway. Martha went to the window and returned with a grave expression. It's her. Michael paled. I can't see her now. Not like this. You don't have to, I assured him. Go to your room. Lock the door. Lisa, please stay with him. I turned to Martha. Ready for another round? Born ready, she replied, picking up her phone. And this time, let's make sure everything is properly recorded. The doorbell rang, followed by insistent knocking. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Christine was there, her face a mask of barely contained fury. Where is he? She demanded, trying to look over my shoulder into the house. Christine, I responded calmly. I think we need to talk like adults before things get any worse. I have nothing to talk about with you, she hissed. I know Michael is here. He needs to come home with me. Now, Michael is an adult, I reminded her. He decides where he wants to stay. He's in no condition to decide anything, she retorted, then seemed to realize her mistake and backtracked. I mean, he's disturbed, confused. He's been under a lot of stress at work. Or perhaps, I suggested, he's suffering the effects of the medication you've been putting in his coffee without his knowledge or consent. Something dangerous flashed in Christine's eyes. You have no idea what you're talking about. Actually, we have a very clear idea, Martha intervened, approaching the door with her phone clearly visible and recording, including the pill that Michael kept as evidence. Christine visibly paled. This is absurd. You're making up stories because you can't accept that he chose a life without you. She tried again to look inside the house. Michael, I know. You're in there. We need to go home. The hallway door opened, and Michael appeared, supported by Lisa. He still seemed fragile, but there was a new determination in his eyes. I'm not going anywhere with you, Christine, he said, his voice firmer than I expected. Christine immediately changed tactics, her face softening into an expression of concern. Michael, darling, you're not thinking clearly. Let's go home. Talk about this calmly. Like we talked about the wedding? He asked. Or about excluding my mother from our lives? Or about the lies you spread about her being senile? I was trying to protect you, Christine argued, her voice now mellifluous. You've always been so impressionable. Your mother manipulated you your entire life, keeping you dependent on her. I just wanted you to be truly independent. Michael took a step forward, still supported by Lisa. Independent? You controlled every aspect of my life. You monitored my phone, my finances, my friends. And when that wasn't enough, he raised a pocket watch. You drugged me to keep me manageable. Christine's face transformed, the mask of concern giving way to raw anger. You wouldn't have been able to handle our life without help. Always so anxious, so indecisive. You needed someone to guide you, structure you. What I needed, Michael replied firmly, was a partner, not a controller. At that moment, another car parked in the driveway. Greg had arrived, accompanied by a police officer. Christine turned, her eyes widening at the new arrivals. What is this? She demanded. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, asked the officer approaching. We received a report about possible non-consensual administration of controlled medication. I'll need everyone to cooperate while we investigate this situation. What followed was an afternoon of statements, documentation, and legal procedures. The pill was placed in an evidence envelope. Michael's diary was registered as documentary proof. Christine, confronted with increasingly incriminating evidence, oscillated between vehement denials and distorted justifications. I was just taking care of him, she insisted as the officer noted her statement. He needs structure, supervision. As the hours passed and the full truth emerged, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief that Michael was finally safe, sadness for what he had suffered, and even a certain reluctant compassion for Christine, whose controlling behavior clearly masked her own deep insecurities. By nightfall, a temporary protection order had been issued, preventing Christine from approaching Michael or my house. She left escorted by the officer, who ensured she collected only essential personal belongings from the house she shared with Michael before going to a hotel. When we were finally alone, myself, Michael, Martha, and Lisa, exhaustion hit us like a wave. Lisa promised to return the next day to check on Michael's condition, and Martha left after a comforting hug. Michael and I sat on the porch as the sun set, a cup of tea in our hands, the silence between us comfortable in a way we hadn't experienced in a long time. I don't know where to begin, he finally said, to explain how I let this happen. You don't need to explain, I replied softly. Not now, not yet. But I want to. He turned to look at me directly. I need you to understand. In the beginning, everything seemed perfect. She was attentive, interested in every detail of my life. No one had given me that kind of attention since you and Dad, I nodded, encouraging him to continue. Then it started so gradually I barely noticed. Small criticisms about how I dressed, about my friends, about how much time I spent with you. He shook his head. Before I knew it, I had given up so many things that I didn't even recognize my own life anymore. And the more I gave in, the more she demanded. That's how abuse works, I said gently. It doesn't start with total control. It starts with small compromises that seem reasonable at the time. The courthouse wedding was the turning point, he continued. She insisted it would be better that way, simpler. Less stress. Only afterward did I realize it was another way to isolate me, to cut one more tie. His voice broke. I'm so sorry for allowing her to exclude you from that moment. I covered his hand with mine. Michael, what matters is that you found your voice again. Your courage. That's what your father always admired in you, not that you never fell, but that you always found the strength to get back up again. As the night progressed, we talked more, sometimes crying, sometimes even laughing at the shared memories that Christine had tried so hard to erase. The road ahead would be long. There were legal issues to resolve, emotional traumas to process, trust to rebuild. But for the first time in a long time, I felt we were truly connected again. 3 months have passed since that night of confrontation and revealed truths. Spring has arrived, bringing new flowers in the garden and new beginnings in our lives. The healing process is rarely linear, and Michael's journey has been no exception. Some days clearer than others, small victories interspersed with moments of doubt and relapse. During the first weeks, Michael stayed at my house, sleeping for long periods as his body rid itself of the residual effects of the medications. The toxicology tests confirmed what we already suspected. Christine had been administering a combination of benzodiazepines and other sedatives, creating a pattern of chemical dependence and mental confusion that made Michael increasingly vulnerable to manipulation. It's like waking from a hazy dream, he told me one morning as we had coffee on the porch. Each day that passes, I remember a little more of who I really am. The legal process unfolded with the deliberate slowness of the judicial system. Christine faced criminal charges of non-consensual administration of controlled substances, in addition to the divorce process Michael had initiated. She alternated between vehement denials and reconciliation attempts, sending letters that oscillated between emotional pleas and veiled threats. She still doesn't understand, Michael commented after receiving another letter, this one begging him to come home before it's too late. She still believes she can control me through fear or guilt. People like Christine rarely see their own behaviors clearly, explained Dr. Bennett, the therapist Michael began consulting. She constructed a reality where her actions were justifiable, even necessary. Deconstructing that narrative might take years, if it ever happens at all. As the weeks passed, Michael began rebuilding his life piece by piece. He returned to work initially part-time, then full-time when he felt stronger. He reconnected with old friends whom Christine had systematically pushed away. He resumed abandoned hobbies including photography, a passion he shared with his father. I found these in the basement box, he said one day, spreading old photographs across the kitchen table. Images of him and James building a wooden boat, of our family vacations at Lake Michigan, of small everyday moments that constituted the fabric of our family life. Your father would be so proud of you, I said, my throat tightening with emotion as we looked at those memories frozen in time. For being manipulated? Michael asked with a touch of bitterness. For finding the courage to leave, for rebuilding your life with such grace and determination. I placed my hand over his. You know what your father always said about stumbles. Michael smiled, completing the phrase. It's not the fall that defines you, but how you get up afterward. As summer approached, Michael found a small apartment not far from my house, close enough for frequent visits, but with the healthy distance necessary for his renewed independence. On moving day, as we unpacked the last boxes, he seemed thoughtful. You know what's strangest? He commented, organizing books on the shelf. During all that time with Christine, I felt like I was suffocating, but I couldn't name the feeling. Something was deeply wrong, but she was so skilled at making me doubt my own perception that I began to believe the problem was with me. Gaslighting, I replied, using the term we had learned in the family therapy sessions we started attending together. Making you question your own reality. Exactly. And the scariest thing is how effective it was. He picked up the old pocket watch, now restored and working perfectly, a symbol of his own recovery. If it hadn't been for that pill, for that concrete proof that I wasn't imagining things, I don't know if I would have found the courage to leave. The final divorce hearing took place on a hot July morning. Christine appeared with her lawyer, her face a mask of studied composure that momentarily cracked when she saw Michael enter, not fragile and confused as she expected, but a bright, clear present, wearing the navy blue suit that James had worn at his own wedding decades before. "Are you okay?" I asked quietly as we waited for the session to begin. Michael took a deep breath. "I am. Actually, I feel stronger than I expected." He looked briefly at Christine before returning his attention to me. "I realized something important in therapy last week. She has no power over me anymore. None. The divorce was granted without contest. The terms exactly as Michael had requested. Christine received a suspended sentence for the criminal charges, conditional on mandatory psychological treatment and maintenance of the restraining order. When we left the courthouse, she tried one last approach, coming closer with that calculated vulnerability we now recognized so well. "Michael," she called, her voice deliberately tremulous. "Please, can we talk? Just the two of us?" He stopped, turned to face her directly. "No, Christine, we can't. It's over." His voice was calm, without anger, but unwavering. "I wish you find help and peace, sincerely, but our paths end here." As we walked away, I felt Michael visibly relax, as if he had set down a burden he had carried for too long. "How do you feel?" I asked. "Free," he answered simply, "like I can finally breathe deeply again." We celebrated that night with a small dinner at my house, just Michael, Lisa, Martha, and me. A simple meal, but prepared with love, accompanied by a bottle of champagne I had saved for a special occasion. "A toast," Martha proposed, raising her glass. "To freedom, to truth, to the courage to recognize toxic situations and the strength to leave them behind. And to family," added Michael, looking at me with bright eyes. "Not just the one we receive by birth, but also the one we choose and build throughout life." Autumn brought new changes, all positive. Michael was promoted at work, his performance flourishing now that he was free from the fog of medication and manipulation. Lisa, whose friendship had been crucial during the crisis, became an increasingly constant presence in his life, initially as a friend and support, then as something more. "We're taking things slow," Michael explained when he finally admitted they were dating. "After everything with Christine, I need to relearn what a healthy relationship is like." "Lisa is a wonderful woman," I replied, genuinely happy for him. "And more importantly, she sees you as you truly are, not as someone to control or mold in her own image, but as someone to respect and love in your entirety." One November afternoon, while helping Michael install new shelves in his apartment, I found a familiar small book in a box, the diary James had given him so many years ago, which had become an involuntary record of his abusive relationship with Christine. "What do you plan to do with this?" I asked, holding the diary carefully. Michael considered for a moment. "Keep it," he decided, "not as a reminder of suffering, but as evidence of survival, of overcoming." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I've started writing in it again. New entries, new memories, as the first anniversary of that fateful afternoon when Michael finally left Christine approached. He organized a small charity event in partnership with a local shelter for domestic violence victims. Titled Beyond Appearances, the event aimed to raise awareness about less recognized forms of abuse, especially psychological abuse and manipulation that often precede or accompany physical violence. "Many people still don't understand that men can be victims too," Michael explained during his opening speech, "or that abuse can occur in seemingly privileged and stable relationships. The shame and isolation that come with this experience make it even harder to ask for help. Watching him speak with such eloquence and conviction, I felt my heart overflow with pride. This was my son, not the diminished, confused man Christine had tried to create, but the strong, compassionate, authentic man James and I had always known he could be. After the event, as we walked together under the golden autumn leaves, Michael linked his arm with mine, a simple gesture of affection that had become more frequent in recent months. "Thank you, Mom," he said softly. "For what, dear?" "For not giving up, for seeing through the lies, for being there when I finally found the courage to leave." He stopped, turning to look at me directly. "Do you know what I've learned from all this?" "What?" "That true love never tries to make you smaller, never tries to isolate or control you. True love gives you roots and wings, security to grow and freedom to fly." I recognized the words. It was something I used to tell him as a child, a lesson that had apparently remained stored somewhere deep, resisting Christine's attempts to eradicate it. "That's exactly it," I agreed, feeling tears of gratitude forming in my eyes. "And it's never too late to rediscover that truth." Today, almost 2 years after the secret wedding that broke my heart, our family is stronger and more authentic than I ever imagined possible. Michael and Lisa are engaged, planning a simple spring wedding to which, this time, I was the first person invited. He continues his volunteer work with abuse victims, transforming his pain into purpose. And I have learned my own valuable lessons about resilience, patience, and the unshakable power of true love. Christine eventually moved to another state, complying with the legal terms of her agreement. But from what we've heard, still struggling to recognize the damage she caused. I pray for her sometimes, hoping she finds a path to genuine healing and growth. When I look back to that terrible moment when I discovered my son had married without me, I realize it was just the first sign of something much darker. But it was also the beginning of a journey that, however painful, led us to a place of greater truth, connection, and freedom. For anyone listening to my story who is trapped in a relationship where you feel diminished, controlled, or isolated, whether you're mother, son, wife, or husband, I want you to know one thing. You deserve to be loved in your entirety, not despite who you are, but because of who you are. And it is never, ever too late to reclaim your life and your heart. Because even when others try to erase us, we can choose to stand firm in our truth, maintain our dignity, and trust that authentic love will always find its way back home. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. There are so many people silently facing similar battles, and sometimes knowing we're not alone makes all the difference in the world.